Welcome to One Tired Teacher, episode 93, which LMS works the best for my elementary classroom? So that is the question. Which learning management system is the best for you while you are kind of muddling through this e-learning, hybrid, blended, distance learning in the classroom with limited materials, all in between? Because finding the right system or the right platform for you to use really can make a huge difference. So I'm going to break down a few of the most popular and really talk a little bit about it today. Hope you stick around.
Welcome to One Tired Teacher. And even though she may need a nap, this teacher is ready to wake up and speak her truth about the trials and treasures of teaching. Here she is, wide awake. Wait, she's not asleep right now, is she? She is awake, right? Okay. From Trina Debery Teaching and Learning, your host, Trina Debery.
Hey! So today we're breaking it all down and trying to understand a little bit more about what it is a learning management system. Like, why is it important for us to determine which is the best one for us? And sometimes we don't even have an option. Like, we are given a specific learning management system from our schools and we're expected to use it. And there's no varying from that. And that can be really frustrating because sometimes I think that school systems pick an LMS based on what would work K through 12. And that's not always the best option for K through 5, because we know that kindergartners through fifth graders are completely different learners than they are in middle school and they are in high school, and especially than they are in college, which is another factor that some districts take into consideration. They think about the higher education platforms and they think about what are being used, what are the most efficient for that purpose. But it's not the same thing. So sometimes I'm wondering, like, we're using this one size fits all mentality, and it's not always the best, and it's definitely not the best for our younger learners. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today and kind of understand some things, break down some terminology, kind of look at some options that we have, even if we are locked in. Like, there are some options, there are some workarounds. And if you are a specific rule follower and you refuse to veer off the path, then you're going to be frustrated. I'm just going to say that right now. You're going to be very frustrated, especially if your district has kind of tied your hands and is not allowing you some autonomy and some creativity and some ways of actually making it work for you. Because I'm going to tell you, it's super hard and teachers are struggling. It's frustrating. Even when we pick really good systems, sometimes when we turn certain features off, that makes the system not work the way it's supposed to work. It's a lot. So hold on to your hats because we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And I'm not going to go down a super dark negative path like I did a couple episodes ago when I was like really at my wit's end. So I'm going to try to stay off of that. I'm just going to try to figure out solutions because now I'm on the solution path. Like, what can we do to make your lives a little bit easier? What can I help you with? What can I offer you that's going to help in this situation? Because right now a lot of you are in very tough situations and it's hard. And so we've got to figure out some solutions to these things, because I don't know if we can maintain this level of service, of work. And that's what we're doing. You're offering a level of service, and I commend you for that. And I think that teachers are flexible and they're unbelievably hard workers, and they're dedicated to the profession and mainly to the children, and sometimes to our detriment. I mean, the system often will take as much as they can from you in very little regard to what that actually means for you, what that means to your family, what that means to your health, what that means to your emotional well-being. And that can be difficult. So let's figure out how to get some of that back and take some things back for ourselves and really figure out what is the best thing that we can do for kids. So first of all, when I first jumped into the world of LMS, it was like 2011, 2010. I was working on my master's in educational technology and media design through this school online called Full Sail, which is there's actually a campus in Orlando, Florida. But I was doing an online program, and it was incredible. It was unbelievable experience. And I feel very, very blessed because I learned a lot about this. I learned a lot about learning management systems. That's where I learned about podcasting, learned about iMovie, I learned about multiple intelligence. I learned about project-based learning. Like, I learned so many incredible things that were way ahead of the time. I feel like we're finally coming around to some of these things. And that was, a lot, like 10 years ago. That was a decade ago. So it's really quite unbelievable. And so I learned about an LMS. We had to pick an LMS to use for one of our courses for a project. And we needed a place that we could house and store information, and that we could, it was like a technological center where it stored data, and it had like a network and servers, and it was a digital learning experience. We could add students and we could communicate with one another. And the first one that I found was Edmodo, actually. And Edmodo was like kind of bigger at the tech conference, and there was a lot of conversation about Edmodo, and I really liked Edmodo a lot, and it was very easy to use. So that's the one that I kind of found on my own. But then I had a professor that wanted us to use Schoology. And so I was introduced to Schoology for the very first time. And again, this was in 2010. And the way that he brought it to life really helped me realize that was probably the way I was going to go. So I used it in my classroom in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, until I left the classroom to go on to some other things. But I put this in place for my students. And I often think about this today, and I think if a global pandemic had hit my classroom during that time, it would have been a natural transition for my students. And I was teaching second grade. So it would have been a natural transition for my students to go online, because we were online in the classroom. Like, we had a place where we stored assignments, and we did book clubs inside of Schoology, and we had conversations inside of Schoology. They were used to turning work into Schoology. I was like moving away from as much paper. I still used a lot of paper and pencil. These are second graders, and it wasn't a global pandemic. And so I did both. Like, I had both systems running, and it was really powerful in the classroom. And I think it still can be, but we have been thrown into it. I also had a ton of training. I was getting a master's degree in a year. And so it was like chocked and jam full of information. And so I was excited about it. I think that's a totally different mindset than being like, oh crap, like next week I've got to teach online and I have no idea what to do. I think that's a totally different mindset. So I'm going to say that right off the bat. So, okay, first of all, what is a learning management system? A learning management system is pretty much anything like an administrator of the system wants it to be, but it's a technological center. It stores and organizes information, especially data, but information, and it does have a server and a network, and it creates like this digital learning experience which aids teachers in teaching and students in learning. And it's depending on your needs, that information, that stored data, can be anything from attendance records to grades to curriculum to grade point averages to health and medical charts. Now, I didn't use it like that, but that's something you could do. It can be professional development modules. It can be professional development histories. It can be e-learning coursework. It can be so much together all in this one platform. Now, do you necessarily use it like that in an elementary classroom? No. Can you use it to store and house lessons and information and connections with students? Absolutely. Can it also be a grade book? Yes, especially in things like Schoology, it can be. And so that's what my district has actually chosen, is Schoology. They've chosen Schoology. However, the problem is that they've turned off some of the features, or they've made it very difficult. They've tied it back to our grading, like our focus platform for like attendance and grading. And so it's like messed some things up, which seems to be very typical of what some school districts do. They take something really good, really powerful, and they kind of mess it up. And which is really frustrating, especially for people that know a little bit better. And it's frustrating for people that don't, because then they think this is the system. This is what it's like. And it's not. This is not what it's like. When you turn off features like being able to add other teachers to your course and make it a collaborative effort, when you don't allow Google Apps to be integrated. When you do things like that, you really make really good systems not so good. And that can be really frustrating. So that's what a learning management system is. And a lot of people, they don't have anything. They're like, I don't know what to use. I'm not sure what to do. Like all of a sudden I have to teach online and I have to teach in the classroom. And how am I going to teach in the classroom and online? Or I have hybrid kids, and the list goes on and on. We're in such an insane situation. It's like, what do I do? And I really want to say that I think finding the right place to like house everything for you, it makes a huge difference. You have that one place that parents go to, that one place that kids go to, and it's consistent. You have a good setup, and I think that makes life much easier. Now, just because my school district purchased Schoology and is using the Schoology platform that they pay for, doesn't necessarily mean you can't use Schoology, because Schoology is free. There's free. I used it for free for years, and I actually helped my school integrate some things. We did a summer learning program across all grade levels, K through 5, in Schoology, and it was all for free. So there is a free version, and it has a lot of the really, really good features. It might not have grade pass back, but hey, that hasn't been that great of a feature. And it doesn't have, they're like very limited with like who's the administrator of the account and things like that in my district. And so you have like your hands tied, but when you have it for free, you don't have your hands tied. You do have access to all that. And it does make it 1,000 times easier. So I would recommend a learning management system. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to jump out and go get Schoology, because there are many others, and there are many others that higher education use and that high school and middle school, but I want to talk specifically about ones that are really good for elementary school, because there's a lot that have been like kicked around. And I've heard teachers mention Schoology. I've heard teachers. I haven't heard a lot of Edmodo, to tell you the truth, even though I haven't looked at Edmodo in a very long time, but I am going to talk about like Schoology versus Edmodo versus Google Classroom today. I want to talk about that. And I even want to mention Seesaw, because that's another one that I hear. And I want to say right up front that Seesaw is not a learning management system. It doesn't have all the components of being able to house all that technological, this like assignments, and then it has connections with conversations and things like that. It is a good place to like place work or assignments and have kids work through things like that. It's very simple, so it's really good for primary, but it doesn't necessarily have all the components that you might need or want if you're thinking about like having a class online. So you can integrate it. You can totally integrate it. So that's something to keep in consideration. And I'm not going to talk a ton about Seesaw, because I don't have a vast knowledge on Seesaw, but I do know that a lot of primary teachers are really happy with it. And so it's something to consider when you're thinking about your learning management system. Another thing that I want you to consider is that there are some tools that you can integrate into an LMS, even if your district is not allowing you to integrate. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of those workarounds, because sometimes we have to do workarounds to make it work for our class and our kids, despite the craziness that exists in our school district. Something that I have learned in the past like 25 years in education is that I don't think I've ever met a technology manager or a really like a tech person that isn't super paranoid. And it's not a jab, but it's like they don't think teachers can handle having access to passwords or access to, being able to download their own apps, or that doesn't make any sense to me. I understand that they're like, they could mess something up, and there's teachers out there that are not going to do it right. And sometimes I'm like, are you doing like a one size fits all punishment? Because that's what it feels like to me sometimes. Like, I wouldn't, just because I have one or two kids that can't necessarily handle maybe their body or their words in the classroom, I wouldn't say, well, everyone in the classroom is not going to be able to do this because of these two students. I'm not going to do that, because I know that's not effective, and I know that's like, defeating to the people that are capable, and it's it causes so much frustration and angst, and it feels unfair, and it doesn't feel equitable, and it's frustrating. So I'm not going to do that. And I don't feel like we should be doing that in school systems either. Especially, we should not be doing practices that we tell other teachers not to do, and then we do to teachers. Like that's very alarming to me. So yes, I think that people can mess things up. Do I think you can fix it? Absolutely. I feel like there's very few things that you can completely ruin and screw up forever. I think that there are things that can be fixed. And so we need to have a little bit more fearlessness, which like jumping into things and trying them out, because that's part of learning, especially in technology. Kids are fearless. They will try anything. They're not afraid they're going to mess something massive up. They just do it. They just click on it, and they learn from that. They learn powerful lessons. And talk about growth mindset. Like they totally learn things, and that's what we need to be doing as well, especially because we are dealing with kids that are supposed to be digital natives. Like they've grown up with the technology their whole entire lives. You know, you're not going to meet a child now that has never experienced the use of technology, although I take that back, because I just met a third grader that's like, I don't know how to turn on the computer. And I'm like, what? But I think that's because we're going so far backwards in some of our schools. Like we're not using technology to enhance and to learn and to develop skills. We're using it as like one platform for constant testing, and that's it. And I think that that's really sad. That's a whole nother topic. All right. So that's the one thing about Seesaw to keep in mind, that that's not necessarily an LMS. And also to keep in mind, even Google Classroom is not really an LMS. Google Classroom, which is a great and powerful system, it is definitely one that it's not necessarily a learning management system, but it does have that aspect of online learning, and it's more focused on integrating tools and that teachers are already using. And it's the idea behind Google Classroom is it really brings together some of Google's most popular apps and services, such as Google Docs and Google Slides and YouTube, and it kind of strips it down. It strips down the LMS, and educators can use it on the fly to deliver traditional instruction outside of the classroom, which is really powerful. So I think Google Classroom can be very powerful, but there's some aspects of it that are frustrating if you're going to use it as your sole learning management system, which is kind of like your online class. So that's how you want to think about it. And Google Classroom is great for some things, because there's, like I said, all the Google apps, whole Google suite is included in Google Classroom, like Google Slides, Google Sheets, Google Docs, Google Drawing, Google Meets, Google Voice. Like all these things are so powerful. And then like things like TPT offers, a lot of people have created, myself included, I've created a ton of products and resources on Google Slides so that you can use it in Google Classroom. So that makes it very easy to integrate and easy to like assign and get out there to your students. But that's still, it's like when you're getting it back, like what does it look like? Can you organize things? It's like this stream of information, and it's really hard to like keep things organized. And from the user's end, like the students and the parents, that's frustrating and can be difficult. In something like Schoology, you can also integrate Google Apps. Oh yeah, you can integrate Google Apps, and that's the beauty of it. Although they've made it really difficult in my district, but you can do it. You can turn it on. It's an app that integrates nicely with Schoology, so you can still use all these things inside of Schoology and have this true like online classroom. So that's something to keep in mind. And one way of doing that, like in my district, all of our students do have access to a Google account. And a lot of districts have that, but they won't allow you to share within Google accounts, which is insane. Like it's only strictly allowed in your district. So I'm going to give you an example. So if I have like my Google account under my own personal name, and I have created all of my resources, or under my business name, all my resources that I provide and like sell on TPT, I have all those. I could use them in my classroom, but if I'm working in my district, then I can't share them with myself. Isn't that crazy? So I try to share it with myself, and then it says I need permission. So when teachers run into the problem of permission, a lot of times it's because you're not using your school Google account. So if I want to use my school Google account, I can't share with my school Google account from my personal Google account, which is ridiculous. So I have to recreate everything in my school Google account. Well, that's just tedious and a lot of work. One workaround is downloading your resource into like PowerPoint or something like that, or a PDF, downloading it and then re-uploading it into your school Google account. So that's one workaround. Another workaround, which is the one that I would probably do, and it sounds overwhelming in the beginning, but I'm telling you it's 1,000 times worth it, especially if you're in a classroom and you're going to be the e-learning teacher or the hybrid teacher almost the whole entire year. I would do this. I would have my students and my families create their own personal Gmail account. That way I could still use all of Google Suite and I could easily share it with them and they're not going to get into the permission issue. So I would contact all of my parents. I'd walk them through it. I would have them all create a Google account, and then I would be able to either embed my Google Slides activity into Schoology, because there's a way to embed inside Schoology, or I would share a link and then the students would be able to have access with it. And then when they want to return something or turn something back in, I would teach them how to hit share and they would just put it in the discussion. So it would be like Tommy shares his link to his Google Slides, Sally shares her link to her Google Slides, Billy shares his link, and on and on and on in the discussion. So I would just go click and look at theirs, click and look at theirs, click and look at theirs. It's a little more tedious, but it's definitely doable, and it makes it so that you can create like this learning flow. So those are some workarounds that I would keep in the back of my mind. So let's talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of various tools. And also I want you to keep some things in mind. Like, you don't need to worry about like the higher education space. Like, you don't have to have, your LMS does not have to look like it would in college. So a lot of colleges they use Canvas. I always get that confused. Canvas and Blackboard and things like that. And some elementary schools and middle schools are doing that. And I think, again, like secondary, I think it might work for. Elementary, I'm not so sure. It's a little bit more cumbersome. So I don't necessarily need all of those components. So that's just something to think about. I think it is really different in the K-12 market. And I think one of the things that we do need to embrace are some of those Google Suite tools, because they make learning collaborative, and that's something that we're missing out on when we're doing e-learning, and we don't have to. And as I said, like when I was at Full Sail, I was so not only did I learn some incredible things, one of the things I got to experience firsthand is what real online learning looks like. Most of the time when you tell someone that you got your master's degree online, they're like, oh, you had an online class. Like it's some lesser program. It was so not lesser. It was incredible. The community that was built, the collaboration that occurred. It was a true online learning experience. It was done right. And so I can't help but think this can be done. They didn't just assign things and call it a day. And that's something we have to think about as educators. If we're just assigning things, if we're like, okay, well, we use Wonders as our reading series. Not going to say anything else. And I know that there are teachers that are taking assignments from Wonders, even videos in Wonders, and putting it in Schoology and saying, here's your here's the lesson, here's your assignment, go. And that's it. And I'm like, is that teaching or assigning? That is assigning. And we need to learn the difference, because teaching requires modeling. It requires the students having a chance to try some and you being there to help support them. And then the students doing some independent work and you being able to reflect and comment and offer instant instant, feedback. So we've got to hold on to the things that we know about teaching, and it's students working collaboratively and working together and learning from one another. And if we're just assigning things, they're not. None of that's happening. So that's a huge difference and a problem I think that we're facing right now in e-learning. And we have to really be careful of that, because it doesn't have to be like that. And that's the beauty of my experience in the past, is that I have seen for myself what true e-learning can look like. And it can be very powerful, and it can be very, very thought-provoking and just really amazing. So I will get off my soapbox about that. But anyway, and it's okay in the elementary school aspect or realm if we want to use an LMS light. Sometimes people will say that it's not necessarily a full true LMS like a college might use, but it's more of giving out information and housing information and having a place that's consistent for parents and students to come back to. And Google Classroom could kind of be considered that, even though I think it's a little harder to organize. People have found some ways around that, which is great. Schoology is more like an LMS light. Edmodo, and some people are even using Quizlet, which doesn't make sense to me as an LMS, but it's a tool that you might use inside your LMS, but just, throwing that out there. So, and these platforms, each of these platforms that I just mentioned, they can track and assign online work, and it is associated with blended learning. And it does correlate with improved student learning outcomes. And that's what we're looking for, improved student outcomes. But these platforms are less feature rich than a full LMS, which usually dominates higher education. And I don't know if that necessarily matters in this case, because we are looking for better, for higher student outcome or learning outcomes, and we're looking for collaboration, and we're looking for organization, and we're looking for ease, an ease on the user end. The user end is really, really important. So think about that. Keep that in mind. It matters. All right. So let me give you a little bit of numbers, because I think this is interesting. So there are about 20 million users using Schoology, 50 states, 130 countries. That's interesting. Google brands and Classroom, they're on a mission, and they are talking about impacting 70 million students and teachers who are using Google Suite for Education. Edmodo talks about 87 million members. That's really crazy, especially because it's not one that I've heard a lot about during this time period. So I think that's interesting. Although I like I said, I loved it when I first played around with it. It has been a while since I've gotten on it. They had this polling feature in Edmodo that I really liked a lot. It was very engaging for students, and I've never found that in Schoology. So I thought that was a pretty cool feature. That's just the one that comes to the top of my head. But the enormous popularity and rich learning communities associated with all these platforms, they really have blurred the lines between K through 12 and higher education spaces. So that is something to keep in mind too. And it's really, it's really pretty cool. But we don't have to worry about, like I said, we don't have to worry about that higher level education. So I'm going to stop talking about that, because I really want to focus on what matters for elementary and why we need to choose tools that work in an elementary setting, because that's specifically what this podcast is about. So let's look at Schoology versus Edmodo versus Google Classroom. And like I said, I'm not going to talk a lot about Seesaw, but I want to talk about these specific learning management systems. Okay. So no matter what side you're on, there are some definite unique features that can really, help decide which is really best for you. So some of the common features that you're going to find in these LMSs are, before we get down to those unique features, I want to talk about a brief overview of what these learning management systems have in common. So they have a familiar interface, which is something that is important for elementary school kids. Like Schoology and Edmodo, they have they deliver a friendly, somewhat Facebook-ish interface that will cause No problems on either side of the e-learning spectrum. So they're not cluttered dashboards. They have a spreadsheet style menu. Everything is bright and clean. And it's definitely an advantage to Google Classroom, which isn't as user friendly. So it might be helpful for the teacher, but it isn't always user friendly for the student. And sometimes the parents get confused as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Something else to talk about is these comprehensive products. So first and foremost, Edmodo and Schoology are full-fledged LMSs, and that means you will find them that they have like teacher modules, and there's assessment and discussion panels and announcements and schedules and grading, whereas Google Classroom has some of these relevant functional things, but they have some limitations that we'll discuss further. Google Docs integration. So not surprisingly, the Google solution harnesses the power of all relevant Google apps and services applicable to the learning and knowledge sharing process, which is really the powerful part of Google, which is why we don't want to get rid of Google in no matter what learning management system we're using, because Google has so many more functions, especially like we're a Microsoft district. Unfortunately, we used to be Apple. I had a Mac when I first started teaching for a long time, and then all of a sudden, like at least 15 years into teaching, they changed to Microsoft, which I wanted to just shoot myself. And I still take my Mac to school. I have like a Mac for school, and then I have a Mac for home, and I cannot transfer over because I just find it so limiting. I can't stand Teams. I'm not a huge fan of OneDrive. I think that their forms is not as diverse and interesting, and like is not as good as Google Forms. And I just think it's inferior. That's my opinion. But I do think that Google Apps for Education is has really done some very powerful work, as opposed to Microsoft, which I feel like is very business driven. And again, like, we're not expecting kids to be able to do business things. We're expecting kids to do kid things. We are eventually teaching them how to be out in the business world, but K-5, we're not in the business world. Like, sometimes I get so tired of working kids towards what they ultimately need to be and not focusing on where they are and like moving them along a continuum. So that's just a thing I have to throw in there. So it is worth mentioning that Edmodo and Schoology allow instructors and learners to access their Google Drive accounts for education purposes. So like, you can integrate Google Education, Google Suite into both Edmodo and Schoology. And also, there is no cost in any one of these. So all of these have a 100% like free version, and that is huge. So yes, you can use Schoology if you are like in a district that hasn't chosen one, like, and you're just flying blind and you're trying to figure out how to deliver content to your students. You can actually set up a classroom in Schoology or Edmodo or even Google Classroom for that matter, and you will have something, and that's really powerful. So let's talk about Edmodo. Not Edmodo. Let's talk about Schoology first. That's the one I feel like I know the most about. That's the one that I really like enjoy. It's not Schoology, it's actually Schoology. So that's something that people get confused for a lot, because it looks like it would be Schoology, but it's actually Schoology. My professor like drilled that into our heads, so I finally got it right. But it's globally acknowledged. It's a tool that enables teachers to share e-learning courses, administrate classes, keep grade books up to date, or even chat with fellow instructors or students. It has a great deal of collaborative tools. In fact, it's a social network that magically adds serious stuff such as standards-based course building and detailed analytics. So I think that's pretty impressive. That's right from Schoology. And what really sets Schoology apart is it has an impressive community of contributors, and that's huge. It really gives you some insight into student performance. There's elaborate reports and stats on learners' performance and improvement scenarios, and it's definitely, like, hands down very powerful in that aspect. There's some native apps, and here is the plus sides of Schoology. It's a great social tool. It has discussion boards, blog posts, announcements, which is all very helpful when you're looking at an LMS. It has advanced configuration for assessment and quizzes. such as time limitations and retakes and things like that, if you can create a quiz inside of Schoology. Now, I think in my district, we've turned that off, which makes zero sense. So that makes it difficult. So if that's turned off, then that's when I would use a Google form, and I would integrate a Google form and use that as my assessment, because that can be self-grading, and it can be so much easier than dealing with a quiz and assessment inside of Schoology, because Schoology's quizzes and assessments are not as good as it can be in Google. So that's something to keep in mind. It has a cloud-based functionality for sharing assignments, which is really helpful. You can get notifications by email, and it will also notify you when someone has responded in a thread, in a discussion, or in an email. It allows you to synchronize with Google Docs. It's an online distribution and submission of assignments, so everything stays online. It's like a web-based gradebook and attendance monitoring. It's got a top-notch paper grading and annotation feature. So Schoology makes it easy to navigate between multiple versions, deliver feedback in various formats, and naturally store grades safely in the framework. And Schoology addresses the global market and offers customizable solutions for United States schools and non-United States schools. So those are the benefits of Schoology. Here are a few setbacks. So people think that there's a rather steep learning curve compared with the competition. And I would say that compared to Edmodo, I thought learning Schoology was more difficult. So there definitely is a steeper learning curve. So that would be a setback. And one of the problems is that students have to enroll themselves. Like you can't automatically put them in there. Now, if your district has them and that's where ours differs. Like in our district, we purchase Schoology. So all of our kids it's like talks to focus, like as our attendance and grading system. And so our kids are in there, so we can actually add them. And now we've learned that we have to add them differently through focus and assigned courses, which that gets all really tricky, and it kind of limits who can be a part of the course. So I don't love that feature, honestly. And then there's no messenger for students. Like they can't write back to one another. Like they can't email one another. And I think that it can be a good and bad thing. It depends on how you feel about that. So those are just some things to think about for Schoology. In comparison to Edmodo is another like social network for e-learning, and it brings all the stakeholders together in this friendly environmental educational environment, I should say. And it's a classroom, it's an assignment collection point, it's a quiz maker, a grade book, all you can hope for in a learning management system. Edmodo is mobile friendly and built with responsive design in mind. It really is very powerful on the user end, and I think that's great. And you can coincide it with Schoology, and it even overpowers Google Classroom, which is crazy. So it's user-friendly, familiar interface of like a social site. It's got rich opportunities for sharing assignments, handouts, papers, and worksheets. Has an online circulation of assignments along with smart annotation, which is really cool. So you can actually annotate things within Edmodo. The assignments with a due date and convenient task sheets and an interactive quizzes, employing a wealth of options and question types, etc. So what does it makes it so special? Because that's a lot of the same things that Schoology has. What makes it special? Not necessarily the user end though. Like, so I'm thinking Edmodo might be winning in the user end. Its teachers are invited to communicate with other teachers, which is huge. And I feel like Schoology could be that, but in my district, it's not. Edmodo's note allows students to shoot a quick question, share what we commonly know as status in social networks, or submit an exit slip. That's awesome. That's called Edmodo's note. That's pretty cool. I've never heard of that. It's a organized storage for documents. It's secure. It's fast. With personally shareable files and folders. That's awesome. The ability to create smaller student groups within a class. And Schoology lacks this particular feature, which I worked around that with Schoology because I just ended up making folders, and that was for specific groups, but then other groups can actually go in there. So I like that Schoology or Edmodo allows you to create those smaller student groups, and other students are not like a part of that. They can't see it. So here are the drawbacks to Edmodo. It's free. It's a free app in the store. It's only available to the United States, the UK, Canada, and Australia. So if you're anywhere else, you don't have access. As with Schoology, the instructor needs to make sure the students self-enroll before unveiling the course. All right, so again, you're self-enrolling, which can be a pain. You kind of want that to be something that you can control. The iPad app has been criticized as confusing, so that's not a good thing. It's difficult with your file uploading. It makes file uploading confusing, and it sometimes the steps feel redundant. The news announcements and postings can only be displayed in chronological order. As a result, the dashboard may look fairly cluttered. That's the thing I don't like about Google Classroom, and so that's the same with Edmodo, so that's not good. The quizzes offer fewer options and types than like the competition. And like in Schoology, there's no messaging between learners. So that's the downfall. All right, let's talk about Google Classroom. So Google Classroom is available via Google Apps for Education, and it is intended for academic use. And apparently Google is making inroads in all like popular business and thing like that, but it's still like main focus is the classroom. So that's something to keep in mind. It's pretty much, the goals are pretty much the same. It's crucial to facilitate instructor-learner communication. It's easy to offer feedback and smooth document sharing. The document sharing is like neither one of the other two. Google wouldn't be Google without guiding both students and teachers through the process gently with the use of push notifications and emails. Someone might argue that the service is a real pest, but others admit alerts actually make it easier for kids to receive assignments and turn them in on time. So that's something to keep in mind. A headache for an average school teacher is assignment collection goes smoothly with Google Classroom. Students can submit their paper as it is or provide a link to the drive. If needed, teachers can peek into revision history, manage deadlines, throw in quick emails should anyone need help with a particular assignment. So that's something to keep in mind too. But it's still missing some of the key features of an LMS. For instance, there's no such thing as a Google Gradebook. There's no module that visualizes students' grades across multiple assessments. It doesn't include automated quiz component, although if you use a Google form, you can create a quiz. So that is a workaround. So let's see where Google Classroom stands in a crowd. It's an all-around experience. With Google Classroom, you don't have to steer away from customary Google services for yet another line of work or study. It's easy to log in. You can post it on YouTube. You can create documents in Docs. You can attach files from your drive and so forth. And everything is familiar because it's the same layout as Google. It's granular assignment management. It's quick and easy, and the teacher can always see who completed and turned in the assignment and who is struggling with it or through it, which is a huge advantage. It's nice commenting capabilities. Students can leave comments in a number of ways for a multitude of e-learning courses. It's easy to generate a URL for a useful comment and keep it as a reference point for further discussion. Love that. The question feature. The Google Classroom provides a question function that can be used for creating simple quizzes. Once you select the multiple choice option, it turns into a Google form. Otherwise, it can serve as a plain topic or an exit card, which is really great. So some of the fallbacks in Google Classroom. It says restricted account management. You need to register with Google Apps for Education. You have to have that standard like Google ID, but you can't just have a standard Google ID. You have to have a Gmail account. But I, again, think that this could be a workaround. You could have your families create Gmail accounts. Now, if you are talking about managing 100 students, which hopefully in K-5 you're not, even though I've seen people go up to like 50 students, which is still crazy, it's still doable. I think having a personal Gmail account is still doable. And some districts you have a Gmail account, but then you'd have to have everything created inside of your Gmail account, and then you wouldn't have access to any of the things that are available on TPT or out there in the world, and there's thousands of things. And that just makes it all the work fall back on you, which I think is a definite downfall. That's why I think a personal Gmail account really is the workaround. Editing particularities. So once an assignment is allotted to students, they become document owners with all the corresponding editing rights. And as a result, learners may accidentally or intentionally alter assignment content and potentially make a great muddle of the whole process. So that is an issue. And there is a workaround as far as like forcing them to make a copy. And I think that would be something that I would want to do for sure, because I would not want students to be able to mess up my original version. Like that would be difficult, and what a mess. That could be a mess. And then it's known to have like poor online interactions, which is really sad. So it's not aligned with like Google Hangouts. So you can't meet online. There's no chance to have like a live Google Classroom. And there is a live option inside of Schoology, but I don't love it. It's called it's Schoology conferencing, and it's very glitchy. I feel like they have a long way to go with that. So if I were comparing Google Classroom to Schoology and thinking I was just because Schoology has an all online component, that would not be a reason. I would still want to use like Zoom. And Google Meets is something that's newer, and I don't know if it integrates in the Google Classroom, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. Whew. So that was a lot. That's a lot of information to think about. And I really think that's a lot to think about, but you've got to think of some of the pluses and some of the cons. So let's just do a quick comparative feature. Like, all right, a grade book. Schoology has it, Edmodo has it, Google Classroom does not. Like an online assignment collection, like submission collection, all of them have it. Automated quizzes, you can do it in all of them. They all have mobile apps, the teacher collaboration tools. You could do that in Schoology if Schoology and Edmodo allows you to do that, but your district may block that, and that's very frustrating. But you can't do that in Google Classroom, so that's a downfall. You can do, like, the only one that allows you to have like group segmentation is Edmodo. Schoology and Google Classroom don't have it. There's no learner messaging in any of the platforms. You can have a Google Doc syncing, all three of them have it. An ample resource library, that's Schoology. That's the only one that has an ample resource library. The other two do not. Student self-enrollment, all of them, requires all of them. And apps available outside of the US or English-speaking countries, they have that available in Schoology, and they have that available in Google Classroom, but they don't have that in Edmodo. So that's a lot of information on an LMS. I hope it really gets you thinking about which one would work for you, because, they're very different. They're actually very different. And I think that makes it important. I will say the one thing to keep in mind is you want to be able to use Google features and all of them, and you can do that. So that takes that away. All right. Well, that is all I have to talk about for LMSs. I hope that gave you some interesting information and it gave you something to think about. Hang in there. You've got this. I know stopping and learning things about this feels like it's a time waste, but it's kind of like stopping for gas. Like you have to stop and figure some things out so that you can save that time in the end. And I think that's really important because, we're doing the best we can for kids, but you also have to do the best you can for you too. So remember that as well. Take the time you need to learn things, but also take the time you need to rest, because rejuvenating yourself really makes a difference. All right, this one tired teacher is ready for a long, long snooze. Until next time, sweet dreams and sleep tight.